know, it's funny because the last two times these teams faced each other, Niners embarrassed them.
I know, they're missing a lot of O-linemen, though.
Missing everyone.
I know, dude. I'm so excited for the practice squad players.
Yeah, I'm sure, because you know them all from college. You got it, fella. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show, Showdown edition on this wonderful Thursday, November 5th. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, as always, every Monday, every Thursday, this is where you got to be, 10 Eastern time every morning, because we're making it happen. Myself and Matt Gajewski taking a look at maybe the most heinous game we've seen all season, or at least the toughest to dissect. Because Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. We've had a couple of ugly games thus far. New York Jets, Denver Broncos being one of them, but they all turn out to be relatively fun. So I'm actually looking forward to this disgusting mess of an NFL football game.
I think this one sets up to be very fun. We have a lot of practice squad level players, some former college superstars.
You never heard that together. This is going to be really fun. Just a slew of practice squad players.
Oh man, it's going to be exciting. There's a lot of fun dudes on the slate. And I think one thing that can't go overlooked is the roster construction from just a DFS standpoint. It's going to be really fun too. You can basically play whoever you want with some of the value we have. So it's going to lead to some really interesting builds and I think some fun ways to approach this slate and get contrarian.
Cody Sheridan says, going to be a great day. No cap, Laffy. Yeah, you know what? We got to mix things up. Maybe it'll bring us some good luck, Matt. Maybe some good stuff's going to happen. You went without a hat yesterday, too. I went hatless on the Sunday deeper dive. You know what? Take that hat off. Take that hat off. There you go. Let's make it happen. A hatless show. We've got so much to get into, though, and about 40 or so minutes to do it. Matt, I guess we can kick it off. We can start off by saying, well, we're happy to have you guys with us. I almost forgot to say that. Always try and get that in. We love doing this every morning. Love having you guys join us. Make it part of your routine. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, help us get to 50,000. It's good for both of us. We'll show up more in the recommended feed. You'll always know when we have new videos dropping. And it'll help us expand our reach and continue to be able to do free content and get it to more people. So if you like the show, if you like what we do here, really, if you don't subscribe. But if you do enjoy and appreciate what we do here, hit that subscribe button and hit that thumbs up button. It helps us greatly. So the spread on this game is 5.5 points. Was 5.5 points. It opened at 3.5, went to 5.5. Now we're sitting at 7.5, Matt. The total opened at 52. It's down to 48. When I saw 5, I hit it pretty hard because while Kyle Shanahan is very good at trying to improvise and draw up quality offensive plays on short passing throws, end arounds, making it so he doesn't put too much emphasis on his quarterback's arm, it still seems like this could be an extreme uphill battle for a San Francisco 49ers team that has been decimated by injuries and COVID-19 and pretty much anything bad that could happen to a football team.
I mean, where do we want to start? Do we want to start with the skill players? Do we want to start with the offensive line, the quarterback, the defense?
So I think this is where we'll start. Just get your general, well, let's zoom out. We'll take a 30,000 foot view on this real quick. Just your general opinion, your diagnosis on how you think this game goes. Because we're throughout the show, we're going to hit on a number of different ways that it could play out, right? You always talk about it. We both do. You got to tell a story with showdown slates. If you told a story about the Bucs beating the shit out of the Giants last week, well, wrong story. And I certainly got that one wrong. But we're going to hit on a bunch. But what do you think the most likely outcome is here? And who do you like to cover this game? And do you like the total or do you like it to go under?
Man, I'm the luckiest fish in the world because I liked Green Bay right when it opened, and I took it at 3.5.
Oh man, even better.
So that was just pure luck. But I liked Green Bay when we had San Francisco presumably at full strength. We get the Kittle, the Garoppolo news, and then the COVID situation. Now they're over 7-point touchdown favorites. I still like them by the spread with that. I mean, as we'll get to, they're essentially playing a practice squad team.
Yeah, they are. It's sad. So let's do this then. You talked about starting off with skill players, or we're gonna dissect all of that. So why don't you give us and everyone that's just jumping into the room, jumping into the show, why don't you give us the rundown on non-skill players? Not talking about quarterbacks either. Non-skill players, linemen, defensive players that you think are going to place a big emphasis on how this game shakes out. We'll start with Green Bay, if there's anybody here on either side. So we'll start with Green Bay's offense, whether it be the line, and then and San Francisco's defense. Once we get to the Niners skill players, we'll talk about their offense and, of course, the Green Bay defense. Go ahead.
Yeah, for non-skill players, I don't think there's too much on Green Bay's offense. David Bakhtiari and Rick Wagner on the offensive line are both questionable. They've been practicing on a limited basis. It's kind of been what they've been doing all year. They should go. On defense, Green Bay is even weaker than normal. They're already a defense that we want to exploit on a weekly basis. They're down their number 2 corner, Kevin King, and Kamal Martin's on the COVID list. He's only played a couple games for them, but he's their best linebacker. They already put Christian Kirksey on injured reserve, so they were counting on Kamal Martin a lot, and that just helps the run game for San Francisco.
All right. So the Green Bay Packers run game is one spot that I think we need to start with. Then we'll break down the wide receivers and the quarterback position. But as far as Green Bay goes in the backfield, you're looking at some serious question marks here. Jamal Williams is out because of close contact with a player who has COVID-19. Also a running back in A.J. Dillon. They are both sidelined. That leaves us with a questionable Aaron Jones, who is a legitimate, based on Matt LaFleur's statements earlier, a legitimate game time decision. And then Tyler Irving, which is, he's gotten some work this season. He's definitely run some routes and been a little bit more involved than you would think, but I don't know how much opportunity he's going to get on the ground. And then a big-bodied running back in Dexter Williams, who they lifted from the practice squad, Matt.
I think they probably would have brought in another runner, at least maybe another practice squad guy, if Aaron Jones wasn't going to play. So trying to read the tea leaves, I don't think they would go into the game with just 2 backs active. They have before, but generally NFL teams will roster 3 on game days. That's, I think, presumably a little optimistic, but I think Aaron Jones probably does play. If he does, he's going to be one of the best plays on the slate as a 7.5 point favorite here. If he's out, I think we see a direct timeshare between Williams and Irvin. And you did a good job breaking it down. Irvin's more of a pass catcher. He runs a lot of routes out of the slot. Dexter Williams is your big-bodied, 2-down grinding back.
I will say, though, Seattle last week, didn't they only have 2 backs on the active roster with Carlos Hyde and Chris Carson out?
No, they had Nick Bellore.
They did. Okay, so they did actually bring a 3rd back up. Okay.
Yeah, he's kind of a fullback type guy, but they used him as a pure runner.
Because I don't know. I guess I can appreciate your optimism. I'm just not as convinced that Aaron Jones plays on this short week.
I'm not convinced either.
Okay, so let's do this then. If he does play, we'll play the what if game. We'll go by scenarios here. If Aaron Jones is active, San Francisco hasn't allowed a 100-yard rusher this season, but they've also been carved up through the air, and their defense has not been nearly as competent as it was last year. I mean, it's not even remotely close. And a lot of that is the result of injuries, Bosa, Sherman, and more. They've allowed a couple 100-yard games on the ground, but no 100-yard rushers. And in the passing game, that's where they've been carved up quite a bit, particularly as far as passing touchdowns go. But if Aaron Jones is active, knowing that Green Bay is already limited on receivers, competent ones, and I don't know what the case with Allen Lazard is either. Do you like Aaron Jones a lot here as the 3rd highest priced player behind only Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I like him a ton. And it's not just because the Packers are 7-point favorites. I know the matchup is not great for him on the ground, but Aaron Jones, he's a phenomenal pass catcher. So even if, say, he can't get anything going on the ground, He's seen at least 3 targets in every game this year, upwards of 7, 8 targets in some spots. They'll use him as a receiver too, which just helps his floor. And on this type of slate, I think he's a fantastic play if active.
Yeah, I think so too. I can only imagine that he's going to be used excessively as a pass catching back as well, because Aaron Jones has been used in that capacity before, a lot. And Jamal Williams in the 2 games that he started had 11 total targets. But when you look at some of the other games that Jones and Williams have both been active, Matt, they've both been worked into the passing game. So now with Jamal Williams, the clear number 2 back, I mean, it's not a timeshare when they're both healthy, but it's certainly a position where if Aaron Jones gets in trouble early or struggles early, where we've seen Jamal Williams take over the lion's share of that backfield. As a matter of fact, it's happened once or twice this season. But knowing that Aaron Jones has been targeted in 5 games, 28 times, that's almost 6 targets per game. You can only think that with Jamal Williams already out, that he gets even more involved, unless, of course, Tyler Ervin is more active in the passing game. But it also, I think, comes down to Allen Lazard. I don't mean to rant here, but there's so many uncertainties that I'm trying not to miss any of them.
No, I don't think you've missed any so far. You're, I think, on everything with Green Bay. It's a really tough team to target right now. We'll obviously have a ton of late news. Like our live before lock stream tonight is going to be absolutely crucial. You need to watch that to see who's actually playing. But
absolutely.
But I think the running back room is pretty cut and dry in these 2 situations. If we have Aaron Jones playing, he's probably going to see most of the work. They wouldn't play him if he wasn't healthy. They're 7-point favorites with the uncertainty of him not playing. If he's not fully healthy, I think we see a timeshare between Irvin and Williams.
Okay. Yeah, I would assume so. And I would think that Williams gets some goal line work. I would think, though, that Tyler Ervin is on the field. Correct me if I'm wrong, or if you think I'm wrong, but I would assume that he's on the field a lot more than Dexter Williams, based solely on his ability to catch passes. And that would prioritize him, I think, at $200 here. That's the crazy thing. He's $200 in the utility. Dexter Williams is also $200. I could see a scenario play out easily where Dexter Williams vultures 2 touchdowns, but it's not lost on me that last week they had opportunities to do that at the goal line and went to Devontae Adams. There are ways that they can just completely negate the run game down there in goal-to-go situations because of players like Adams, even guys like Robert Tonyan. Who do you like more between Irvin and Dexter Williams, and what's your breakdown for that diagnosis?
I like Tyler Irvin more, and I think you have to because he's the guy that's been active on game days. Dexter Williams he's only been active 1 time this year. He only appeared in 4 games last year. He had 5 carries for 11 total yards. He's been extremely unproductive, even going back to his time in the preseason. Now, Tyler Irvin is mostly playing a pass catching role. He's actually run a lot of routes out of the slot, but they will bring him into the backfield quite a bit. He runs a lot of those end around type plays. And Green Bay really values pass blocking. It's why Jamal Williams often gets on the field here too. That's been a struggle for Dexter Williams throughout his career. I think, like you mentioned, Tyler Irvin probably sees a majority of the snaps. Is Tyler Irvin the goal line back? That's something I'm not sure about.
Right. Me neither. Any interest in playing the 2 of them together? Presumably the answer is a resounding no, because I don't think you even need to. Even if you wanted to, that's such I don't know. I go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's a big thing with this slate. I don't think we need to play 2 min price guys, but in the sake of just trying to build a contrarian lineup, like with Tyler Irvin, Dexter Williams, a few guys on the 49ers, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be like 80% owned. I
know. Yeah, actually, we can pull the ownership up right now, Matt. Go to awesemo.com if you want to check that out. We don't have any promo codes running right now. If you missed the pumpkin one, it was a great opportunity, but we already have a ton of really great deals, especially if you're big in the showdown, but you love playing all the main slates, the afternoon slates, and all of that stuff too. For $3.95 a week, you can grab our Express package, which now includes all of our showdown content, ownership projections, player projections, the top players tool, which is really important for showdown. You'll see what you'll see. Let me see what's free today. But it's less than $4 a week, and on top of all the main slate content and afternoon stuff that we have, all the other slates, all of our showdown stuff is included in that for $3.95. And today our showdown projections are actually free. So are the NFL rankings for week 9 and the MMA top fighter tool. So check that out if you haven't been over there. But we have something for everyone, man. Less than $4 a week for all the showdown content, all of the other stuff already included in that, the Express Top Stack tool, Express Lineup Builder. And then if you just want to go all out for all of the sports, get the Awesemo Plus Platinum, weekly, monthly, annual. It doesn't matter. We got something for everybody's budget. Go to awesemo.com/join. All the tools built by the #1 DFS player in the world. They are his tools. We don't just slap his name on it. It's the real deal. He uses them. We use them. And that's why so many people have had such good success, because I believe these are the preeminent tools in the industry. Okay, so where was I at? What was I talking about, Matt?
We were talking about ownership and how the fact that we have multiple min guys could lead to a lot of Adams, Rodgers, and Aaron Jones ownership if active. Perfect.
Yeah. The ownership, geez, this is this is insane ownership on these guys. And I guess that should be expected here. So right now, we updated this 20 minutes ago. So it's our most recent run of ownership projections. Davante Adams is at 87%. 31 in the captain spot is insane. That is an absolutely astronomical number. Rodgers at 69%, 20% in the captain spot. I mean, it doesn't get any wilder than that. Then you have a combined 50% captain spot between Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, these project Aaron Jones out. If Aaron Jones is in, I think he'll probably rise to 50 or so percent too. Wouldn't you think?
Wait, not in the captain. You're talking about just overall.
Yeah, utility, yes.
Yeah, I would absolutely think so. There's no George Kittle. There's not even any Brandon Ayuk. There's no Deebo Samuel. And more importantly, there's no number 2 receiver on the Packers that garners any significant target share.
It's true. Does Alan Lazard potentially returning change this? Maybe. It's still really uncertain whether he plays. Last I saw, he posted a picture on Instagram of him on the team's flight. They don't have to activate him till later today, so we just flat out don't know. It's one of these holes with the new IR rules that I don't particularly like. The short-term IR is only 3 weeks. They can practice, but they don't have to be listed with a designation on their injury report. And they can be activated all the way up till I think it's like 4 p.m. Eastern time on game day. So we legit will have no idea if Lazard is even going to be off injured reserve till later today.
It's confirmed, like you said, he traveled to San Francisco. I just don't necessarily know what that means. We've seen it many times where players travel with the team and end up not playing, end up not being activated. If he is active, yeah, I think it makes a difference, a marginal difference, but I don't think it impacts somebody like Davante Adams, to be honest with you. Like Alan Lazard with Adams out has seemingly been the go-to guy for Aaron Rodgers, but really it's been Aaron Jones. And they've just done everything they possibly can in the backfield to move the ball, which has worked for them in a variety of spots this season and last year. Ultimately, though, Matt, if Alan Lazard is healthy, are you willing to pay for him? He's 11-1 if you want to throw him in the captain spot, and he's 7,400 in the utility on DraftKings.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to get to him. I think he's just straight up a better player than Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Marquez Valdes-Scantling has had a pretty good target share with Davante Adams active. Like he has 8 and 5 target games mixed in there. So I think you can certainly look to a secondary pass catcher for Green Bay. I think Alan Lazard is probably the best of the bunch. And I think he's going to provide more leverage today than he normally would based on the pricing structure we had. So I'm trying to find leverage in unique ways. I think playing a lot of Lazard, maybe even captaining him. So say you captain Lazard. You can just jam in all the studs around him because we have 50% of captain ownership going to Adams and Rodgers, another nearly 20% going to Mullens and Hasty. Just playing like the number 2 receiver on Green Bay at the captain gives you a lot of leverage.
Yeah, outside of that game against Detroit where Davante Adams got hurt, all 3 of his targets came in the second quarter. He's been targeted 17, 10, 16, and 11 times in the remaining 4 games that he's played this season. The captain spot ownership is insane. His overall ownership is insane. Is that going to get you away from him in the captain spot? Do you not care? Because there's no doubt about it. With 100% certainty, I can say Davante Adams in some form or fashion will decide the direction of this slate, because I don't envision there being a spot where it's like you don't have him and it doesn't really matter, or you do have him and it doesn't really matter. I think it's either you don't have him and it helps you immensely, or it kills you, and vice versa. That's at least how I feel based on what we've seen from him this season.
I think you absolutely need him. And this is my personal take. There's always merit to fading guys like this. I just don't know, like, the opportunity cost today. Who are you playing instead?
Right.
There's just no one on the slate with his opportunity. So I think you eat it. You play him at utility, maybe you get a different captain, could be a way to do this. Or you just play him at captain and you find a way to get Contrarian around him. There's a lot of players, especially on the 49ers, that will get to near the minimum price, not carrying a lot of ownership just because they're relatively unknown. And we know where ownership is going to be. It's going to be on these big time Packers.
Dude, it's so nuts because normally if you're trying to roster Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, it's going to be very difficult. Like, you can do it maybe, but you have to throw a defense in there. You'll have to throw a kicker or something in there. You have to go super cheap with someone you're not really fond of. But now, with the pricing on some of these guys, based on the injuries that we've seen, based on the COVID-19 absences, and then if Aaron Jones is on the shelf, it adds to that even more with 2 minimum salary running backs. It's really easy to get to Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers.
Extremely easy. And again, I think this is one situation where, I don't feel great about it, but I think we just got to eat it. Like, I just don't know who else we play.
So I'm building a lineup. You and I think at the end of the show, let's just build one. We'll assume it's for single entry tournaments or something, and see where we come in at. But I think no matter what, we're going to have, and I think you're going to get a good amount of overlap today. But that's any showdown slate. The reason I asked you about Adams though is, like, I agree, you absolutely need him. It's just like, what are the chances that Adams doesn't finish as the captain, or as the best captain? What are the chances that he doesn't finish as the in the top 6 or something like that? And amazingly, this is what's so great, man. We have that answer for you. Yeah, like that little setup there. Our top showdown plays tool for DraftKings and FanDuel shows the probability that they are going to be the top scorer, probability that they will be within the 2 through 6 range, so the utility, or the 2 through 5 range if you're on FanDuel. So, what do you think the probability is that Davante Adams is the top scorer overall on the day?
30%.
Very close. 35%.
I'm not surprised.
Probability that he is 2 through 6 is 46.9. Now, someone might look at that and be like, that seems low. Yeah, but that's not including the number 1 spot. So when you're taking the top scoring probability and the 2 through 6 spot, those numbers are downright absurd.
It's true. And this is part of the reason why I think just playing him is the best move. I think he'd have to get hurt to not end up in the optimal.
What are you doing with Aaron? Yeah. What are you doing with Aaron Rodgers?
I'm just eating him too. I think, even playing him and Nick Mullens in the same lineup is super affordable, and we get the better implied team total on this side. I think there's more merit to fading Aaron Rodgers than Davante Adams, just because the target share is so condensed there. So when you look at them, Aaron Rodgers is throwing, let's say, for example, 250 yards. Davante Adams' target share is so high that he likely eclipses 100 yards in that scenario, and he's going to be the optimal captain over Aaron Rodgers. So I think I'm more likely to fade Rodgers, but again, I'm probably not going to fade either.
Okay. Let's wrap up the Packers side of the ball. We got to Rodgers. We talked to Adams. If anyone's just joining now, you can feel free to go start from the beginning. But Allen Lazard traveled to San Francisco, but he still hasn't been activated as far as we know. So we don't know if he's actually going to play. We'll find out soon. Aaron Jones seems like a legitimate game time decision here. In the event that he doesn't play, you're getting Tyler Ervin. I would expect him to be on the field more, but also to see Dexter Williams worked in. It's so ugly. So let's close it out with this. If Allen Lazard doesn't play, or even if he does, are there any, tertiary options in the passing game that you want to get to? Is Robert Tonyan in play for you? Is MVS in play? Do you say, you know what? Maybe I'll take a shot on Equanimous St. Brown or Jace Sternberger? These are the questions that need to be answered today, Matt.
Yeah, in your low risk contests, I think you ignore them. If you're playing the Millie Maker tonight, I think you definitely need to consider them. If Alan Lazard is out, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is going to function as the number 2 receiver for Green Bay. His targets have steadily declined 4 straight games. They've dropped, but he's still seeing a ton of air yards, 30% of those. And he was still on the field a lot last week. 82% of dropbacks, he was out there running a route. Highly inefficient. I think there is a chance that he slowly starts to come off the field more for someone like Equanimeous St. Brown. Equanimeous St. Brown, his route share climbed to 39% last week, had 3 targets, but he dropped 2 of them. Aaron Rodgers was absolutely not pleased with Equanimeous St. Brown last week's game. And then, after that, like Robert Tunyon's in a direct timeshare with Jay Sternberger. When Sternberger's active, Tunyon's running about 50 to 60% of the routes. Sternberger's out there for the rest, about 30 to 35%. They've both been targeted heavily, and this is not something that Rodgers has done a lot in his career. But Sternberger, he saw 4 targets last week. Tunyon saw 7. I think if you're just looking for contrarian plays that will be low owned, these guys fit the bill just because of how much ownership we see on Adams, Rodgers, potentially Jones.
All right. Wow. Final thoughts on Green Bay, top options here. We know Devontae Adams is one of them. And just from an overall lineup construction standpoint, outside of Adams, is there anyone that you think is a must or close to a must play?
I think Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Adams are all must plays if they're all active. I think the one that gives you the most leverage in the captain spot is Aaron Jones if he's active. But again, that remains to be seen. If Jones is out, we're just going to see even more ownership coming on Adams and Rodgers.
Yeah, I totally agree that you have to be looking at Jones in the captain spot if in the event that he's active and not on a snap count and not expected to be limited. Would there be any merit at all? We got to unearth that, or we got to, leave no stone unturned here with such a small slate, with a single game slate. We got to touch on everything. And strategy sometimes is more important than just saying, yeah, he's a good play, he's not a good play, whatever. Would there be any merit to captain spot, throwing someone like Tyler Ervin in the captain spot if Aaron Jones is inactive, or anyone outside of Rodgers, Jones, and Adams? Do any of them deserve to be in a captain spot in obviously large field tournaments?
Yeah, they do. And it's because of the leverage they provide. So in the event Aaron Jones is out, Tyler Ervin will be on the field a solid amount. He'll probably split some time with Williams. But if Ervin catches 5 or 6 balls, finds the end zone once, he's the minimum price. So you're going to find roster constructions with him and all of the other studs around him. That could be an avenue to getting you to the top. Again, Ervin is likely going to be nearly unowned in the captain spot. So you get Ervin, you jam all your studs around him, and then maybe you play one other semi-contrarian player, and you could have a leveraged, unique lineup.
I thought the same thing. Now, there's also a possibility that you just get crushed, right? But
you know that going in, right?
Exactly. But that's sometimes the decisions you have to make, and in showdowns, I do that a lot. So Tyler Ervin has multiple targets in 3 straight games that he's played, at least. Actually, I guess. Did he not play? Well, that he's actually been on the field for, because I think there were a few games where he didn't see a single snap. Ultimately, it could be worthwhile, and it's scary. But if you're MMEing, I think having a few of those could make sense for sure. Equanimeous St. Brown too was somebody that could have endeared himself to Aaron Rodgers last week, and found a way to not do that. Dropped a couple passes that would have been really big. And I don't know. If Alan Lazard comes back, it's over for him anyway. You want to talk about the 49ers?
Let's do it, man. Let's talk about the 49ers.
We got a lot to get into here. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet, guys, and subscribe to the channel. Help us grow the channel. If you like this channel, if you like the shows, subscribe, show some love, and you'll always know when our new shows are coming up. So San Francisco 49ers at home opened at 3.5-point dogs. They're now 7.5-point dogs, 7 points, depending on where you're looking at it. The total dropped from 52 to 48. They are down George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Jimmy Garoppolo, Raheem Mostert on the IR, Deebo Samuel, Jeff Wilson, Kendrick Bourne. Is Jordan Reed back yet?
He's in the same situation as Lazard.
Okay. So Jordan Reed might not be back either. I mean, unbelievable. Even if I'll even take it further. You look at some of these cheap guys too that are sidelined. Richie James, like they don't have anybody, which leads me to the first question, Matt. What the hell are you doing with the pass catching, the wide receiver core, the tight end position for the San Francisco 49ers? Please take as much time as you need.
Well, we have the wide receiver one, so the de facto wide receiver one. Trent Taylor is $400. So he is another one of these min price guys that he's going to see significant opportunity for sure, without a doubt. We have questions about Tyler Ervin and Dexter Williams. We do not with Trent Taylor. He's only played 164 snaps this year. 119 of them have come in the slot. He's seen 16 targets, 9 receptions, 77 yards. That is the most out of any pass catcher on the 49ers that we know for a fact is going to play. If Jordan Reed is active, he will have eclipsed Trent Taylor. But we still know Trent Taylor is going to be essentially on the field for 100% of the routes, running a lot of them in the slot. And he's nearly the minimum. I think he's the avenue that opens up all this ownership for Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers. And I think he's the preferred play down there. With that said, we have a bunch of other receivers near the min price too that could see some opportunity. I think the wide receiver too, if active, is Richie James, dealing with an injury of his own. He's appeared in 3 games for San Francisco this year, primarily playing on the boundary, but he's usually just a special teams guy. So he's only played in the event of previous injuries. Only 11 routes for Richie James this year. I mean, if you want to go back to college production, he was a dominant player at Middle Tennessee State, had 2 1,000-yard seasons before an injury ended his junior season, but an athletic kid, ran a 4.48 40-yard dash. I mean, you could look to him. If Richie James is out and we have Trent Taylor as the wide receiver 1, I'm pretty sure River Craycraft is going to be the wide receiver 2.
That's what I'm seeing too. Trent Taylor should at least be able to avoid Jair Alexander, right? I think Alexander's played like 10, 11 snaps in the slot this year. That's pretty beneficial because one thing we've seen, and by the way, you want a crazy, not even a statistic, but just a crazy tidbit here. The 49ers will not have a single pass catcher on the field tonight that they did in either game, either big win against Green Bay last year, Matt. Not one. So it's so crazy. I don't even think McKinnon was healthy in those games. So it's outrageous the amount of turmoil this team has gone through and is still somehow sitting at 4-4. But I digress. With Taylor, do you like the fact that Green Bay has been beat up in the middle of the field this year, knowing that Alexander has really just locked down quality wide receivers? He hasn't faced a ton of elite number 1s, but in all of the opportunities he's had to prove that he's one of the best, he has done so. It does feel like the middle of the field is one spot they've been beaten up. You can look at Rob Gronkowski and a number of other examples going back to even Randall Cobb, who had 9 for 90, and a few others that I can't think of. As Trent Taylor being the de facto number 1 seems absurd, but you might get a game from him where he has like 7 for 65. I don't know if I expect him to break off any like long chunk receptions. Hopefully he can operate after the catch a little bit, but it is really beneficial that he's someone that operates mainly in the middle of the field.
For sure. I wonder if they're just going to stick Jair Alexander on the number 1, regardless of where he lines up. I have no idea whether they will or not. It's just such a depleted pass catching core. Like, what do you really get by putting him on Richie James? What do you get by putting him on River Craycraft? Right. And he's going to guard somebody. I don't know who it is.
What do you get for putting him on Trent Taylor, though, honestly?
You're right. It's a valid question. And I'm not 100% sure. I'm also not convinced that any of these guys absolutely locks down the starting wide receiver position. I think it's conceivable we see Richie James in a timeshare with Craycraft. And I mean, like, Kevin White's on this team. Like, Kevin White could play some snaps. He's actually played more than River Craycraft to this point. There's a weird thing with the practice squad players this year. It's a new rule. Teams can do something called flex a practice squad player, where they essentially remain on the practice squad, but they can go to the active roster for a game. It's a COVID situation thing, but you're only allowed to do this twice. They've done it twice already with Kevin White, so they'd actually have to promote him to the active roster if they want him to play tonight. I don't know if they're going to, but he hasn't caught a pass since 2018. I mean, like, this is rough.
It is so bad. And again, though, what it comes down to is when you look at some of the prices on these players, River Craycraft is $200 minimum salary. Trent Taylor is minimum salary. So the number 1 and number 2 receivers on the 49ers are at or right around minimum salary. Kevin White, minimum salary. Richie James, also $200 minimum salary. I've never seen this before in a showdown slate.
I don't think I have either. So one thing I want to get your take on, San Francisco doesn't run a lot of 11 personnel anyway. They're one of the, I guess, lightest 11 personnel teams in the NFL, and it's because they have Kyle Juszczyk. Kyle Juszczyk's on the field a lot. He doesn't really touch the ball much himself, but they run a lot of this like 21 personnel, which is a 2 running back, 1 tight end, 2 wide receiver set. I think some of these guys we probably don't even need to consider, like outside of maybe Craycraft, like looking at Kevin White, Chris Fink's another player who's not even in the player pool, but he could be active tonight. I just don't think you need to get to those players because even though Juszczyk's not doing anything himself, he'll be on the field.
I agree with that. So of the pass catchers, who do you like most? And how many of them do you think is appropriate to get into lineups? Like, do you really need to start? Let me give you an example here. If you have Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones in a lineup, okay, and I'm putting Adams in the captain spot. I just want to see what we get here. And then you throw Trent Taylor in there at $400. Amazingly, unless you wanted to play Nick Mullens, and even if you did, you can still do whatever you want. You can do pretty – if I threw Nick Mullens in here, okay, and I said, you know what, I think you're going to get some opportunity for them to pass the football. You still have $1,000 to get in one of these other cheap players. Or if you said, you know what, I don't want to go with Mullens, I want to go with Hasty at $7,200, then you still have $3,000. That's with Adams in the captain spot, Aaron Jones in the utility, Aaron Rodgers in the utility, and the quote-unquote number 1 receiver in Trent Taylor also in the utility spot with Jermichael Hasty.
You can do whatever you want on this slate. I think it makes the ownership game one to be especially cognizant of because you can play whoever you want. And with that, like we've mentioned before, you're just going to see so much ownership on the studs at the top. So be cognizant of who you're captaining. Be cognizant if you're captaining Adams, Jones, Rodgers, how are you getting different? Trent Taylor's probably going to be widely owned just because he's the avenue to opening the slate. So, I mean, he's the same prices essentially as Richie James, River Craycraft, Tyler Irving. Maybe you just play one of those guys instead, and that's your contrarian approach.
Yep. Do you think, and obviously Aaron Jones status, Alan Lazard's status, they're going to loom large leading up to lock. Like you said, live before lock starts at 8 or 7:20 Eastern. Be sure to be there. I believe it's Alex Baker and Kyle Dvorchak tonight. I'm scratching my head at the roster construction on all of this. Ross Dwelly, 4,800. That seems a bit excessive, but I'm wondering if maybe having to pay that much for him is going to bring his ownership down, and it appears that it will. Only 18% ownership. Maybe that's one way to get a little bit different here. Where do you stand on him?
If Jordan Reed's active, I'm not as interested, but
I'm just going to assume that he's out because Jordan Reed's always hurt. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, assuming the inevitable that Jordan Reed is hurt, Ross Dwelly slides in like 1-for-1 for George Kittle. He's a fraction of the player that George Kittle is, but he's on the field a ton. And even last week with Kittle exiting early, Ross Dwelly had 4 targets. We saw him actually play a significant role down the stretch last year. He ran a route on 67% of dropbacks in just a partial game last week. He's going to be on the field a ton. The price, it's not really worth it considering we have Trent Taylor near the minimum. But again, we need to play the ownership game here. If you want a player that's on the field a lot, pass catcher directly attached to Nick Mullens, a team that's going to be trailing and throwing the ball, Dwelly fits that mold, and he will be contrarian.
It's exactly what I was thinking too. Moreover, he had 2 of those targets inside the 20, one of them inside the 10 that went for a score. So not afraid to look to him in the end zone. Your thoughts on Nick Mullens?
Nick Mullens hasn't actually been bad in spot duty. So we have just a small sample with Mullens, but I went and looked at his career stats. 65.9 completion percentage. That's the exact same completion percentage that Aaron Rodgers has this year. 8.4 yards per attempt. That's extremely good. It's in a very small sample, just 372 passes. But I think the main thing to think about with Mullens is that he's competent. He's not DiNucci. He's not tanking the offense. He can deliver the ball to Trent Taylor, Ross Dwelly, whoever it may be. So I think maybe it's not Mullens you want to play by himself because he's a little bit cost prohibitive, not that it matters on this slate. But I think you can confidently look to some of these ancillary pass catchers for San Francisco and put them in your lineup and feel good about it.
All right, so I've been waiting all show to talk about this, which is why I figured we'd hold off to the end, because I think this could be the pivotal. This could be the linchpin in putting together quality lineups or getting blown up. And this is the San Francisco 49ers rushing game. Let me lay this out for you, Matt. I'll give you my line of thinking, okay? If their defense holds up enough and you have in some form or fashion, a neutral game script, maybe a positive game script, but let's just assume it doesn't get too far out of hand. You know that Shanahan is going to look to run the football excessively. We saw what Dalvin Cook did last week. 4 total touchdowns, 3 of them on the ground, a monster rushing game in his first game back after being sidelined a couple of weeks. We know that this is the Green Bay Packers' primary weakness, their ground game, their defense. They really struggle to limit opposing run games. San Francisco leans on the run heavily. Last year, no one had more running back carries than the San Francisco 49ers. The only team that ran the football more was the Baltimore Ravens because of Lamar Jackson. So when I look at this team, and if I'm trying to play out the story, a narrative here that might be a little bit different from the public's popular opinion, if it stays remotely close, Green Bay traveling out west, they've got some injuries too. If it stays close, I think JaMycal Hasty could be one of the best overall plays on this entire slate. That might be a stretch, I get it, or in this entire game, but the kid is actually pretty decent. And as far as like a pure rusher goes, I think he's better than McKinnon. And if it's close, there's no reason to try and get away from the passing or from the running game, especially if it's working. What are your thoughts on the run game for the San Francisco 49ers?
I like it. I'll play devil's advocate for a second here. I think there are concerns. San Francisco is down 3 starting offensive linemen. They've been without Ben Garland for a while now. They've also been without Weston Richburg the entire year. But Trent Williams, he's another guy that went on the COVID reserve list. He's probably their best offensive lineman. Does that matter against Green Bay's just paper mache run defense? Probably not. Green Bay's run defense is without Kamal Martin, one of their better linebackers. So maybe this is a wash. I think we do have a timeshare between Hasty and McKinnon. Hasty's not a pass catcher. McKinnon, that's very much his strong suit. And so I don't know what McKinnon did to get in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, but he certainly has. Still, he ran a route on 47% of dropbacks compared to 27% for Hasty, with far out targeted Hasty as well. I am a little hesitant on Hasty's talent overall, but I think he's going to play significantly here. I think game script is going to heavily weigh into who plays more.
No question about it. But if it's a neutral game script or even to somehow a positive game script, a lot of people probably hear me say that, Matt, and scoff, right? They laugh. Oh, that's not possible. Well, you know what? None of us thought it was possible last week that Tampa Bay would be playing from behind for 2+ quarters. And they did. And Wayne Gallman ended up actually being serviceable. So these things happen. It's the NFL football, or it's the National Football League. The level of parity is through the roof. Crazy things happen. So I'm willing to look at every possible scenario. I'm willing to assume that things can unfold differently maybe than we suspected. And if that is the case, I know we have slightly differing opinions here. You bring up great points on the offensive line, but nonetheless, I still think that they will do what they can to get the football to somebody like Hasty in the event that it's close. If not, he probably gets phased out and you live with it. But if so, you might see a very heavy volume game from him. Close the game out for us, Matt. What else do you have for the San Francisco 49ers that we haven't touched on yet?
One last thing with Hasty. He hasn't been a pass catcher to this point. I don't think it's something that he can't do. So he was a very mediocre college runner, and actually his strength when he was at Baylor was catching the ball, which is really interesting to see him play the exact opposite role in the NFL. The guy had 3 straight years of at least 25 receptions, and he was in a 3-way timeshare, so he very much profiled as that third down back at Baylor. McKinnon, for whatever reason, just has not impressed Kyle Shanahan, so I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Hasty to start assuming some of that work. Again, very small sample with Hasty to this point in his career. He's a practice squad player, so maybe he can handle more of the work there. As far as the rest of the 49ers, I mean, I think it's all going to depend on what you do with these min-price receivers. Like, do you get away from Trent Taylor in the event to be a little different and play like Craycraft or Richie James or someone else on this roster? It's just a tough situation, and I think ownership is the most pivotal thing to consider.
Okay. And for anyone saying there's no chance this game isn't a blowout, obviously most of us assume that it will be a blowout, but the Tampa Bay Bucks were double-digit favorites, Matt, against the Giants. And that game, they played from behind for more than half. The Philadelphia Eagles were 10.5-point favorites against the Cowboys. And while they ended up covering, they were also playing from behind for a large stretch of that game, or what was a neutral game script throughout almost the entirety of it until the sack fumble return for a touchdown late in the game. So these are the last 2 primetime games that you and I have talked about where the teams were double-digit favorites and ended up playing either from behind or in a neutral game script for the large majority of those games. Dude, the Giants had a chance to tie that game on the final play that looked like a pass interference. Both of those games were very, very close. They were ugly games, but they were close. And both of those teams that ultimately won were huge favorites, but did not look like it on the football field. That's the only point I'm making here.
Yeah, showdown. Anything can literally happen. So many bounces. I think like the Millie Maker going into the last play of the game last week, I can't remember what he dropped to, but I think he went down to like $400 in the last play. Like, these little impact plays matter so much.
All right. Cairo, you guys are the same people. I don't know. You are the same people who took Dalvin Cook at 10% last week. I ain't trusting y'all on running backs. I would think that would mean you should trust us on running backs, but I guess not.
We both played a lot of Dalvin Cook.
I know. We talked about him all week. Okay. I actually don't know what that means, but that's all right. Hey, if you haven't checked out our matchup show, it's coming up next. It's awesome. Matt Savoca and myself going game by game for week 9, all 11 of them, breaking each one down one by one. It's a marathon show. It's a lot of fun, but there's no better show to get you prepped for the week 9 slate. Coming up at 11 Eastern, 12 minutes from now. And then Matt, you and Kyle Dvorak have the FanDuel strategy show coming up, which is extremely helpful to people that are looking to get their FanDuel lineups in. What time are you guys going live?
2 p.m. Eastern time, FanDuel centric show.
Okay. And to close this one out, 7:20, Alex Baker, Kyle Dvorak. It's the NFL Showdown live before lock show. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us every single day. It's always a lot of fun. We got a lot more coming up throughout the day. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Hit that thumbs up, and good luck tonight. Matt and I will see you back here Monday morning for the NFL Strategy Show. Very special guest, so be sure to tune in.